Call the special meeting of the governing board and executive session relative to the agenda today, just the special meeting to order. It is 6:00 p.m. Can we please stand for the pledge? On the correct. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if we could do roll call, please. I'll start. Donna Lewis.
Mike Sharkey.
Amy Carney. Karen Warner.
Matthew Patinsky. Thank you.
You're welcome. I make a motion to approve the agenda as presented. I need a second.
A second.
All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Approval 5-0. Superintendent, Dr. Menzel.
Good evening, President Lewis, Vice President Sharkey, members of the governing board, staff, and guests who are here this evening. Just one item to highlight, and that is on Friday night, we celebrated with the Charros the 39th Annual Charros Education Awards. 4 of our 5 board members were able to join as teachers from each of our buildings were recognized as the Charro Teacher of the Year. We had students recognized from each of our high school, we had other scholarship recipients. It's truly a special event where you see community come together to celebrate excellence and the support that we have in Scottsdale for our system of public education. And so it was a highlight of my entire weekend, and thanks to those who were able to join us for that event.
Thank you. As we move into the body of the agenda, the information item first is the Scottsdale Administration Association, the Scottsdale Education Association, the Scottsdale Support Professionals Association, and the Scottsdale District Administrators Association. Updates from those 4 organizations. How would you like to have them? All 4 come up?
Yeah, if they all 4 come up, then they can decide who's going to go first. Maybe they've already done that.
Great. Welcome.
That one. Okay, great. Got it. Thank you for having us this evening. I'm Dr. Janelle Dansky, president of the Scottsdale Administrator Association. And as Shelley and I have reflected on this past year, the SAA is proud of the strength and unity demonstrated across our membership. We continue to see high levels of engagement and participation, a testament to the collective commitment of our administrators to support one another and lead with purpose. We are grateful for the 2% salary increase, which represents an important acknowledgement of our work our members do each day on behalf of students, staff, and their broader community. We continue to see high levels of engagement and participation, a testament to the collective commitment of our in stereo. Through the IBN process, our employee groups have come together in meaningful and productive ways, building trust, strengthening relationships, and focusing on shared interests. This collaborative approach has allowed us to engage in thoughtful dialogue and work towards solutions that support our staff and ultimately benefit our students. At the same time, we recognize that this year has not been without difficulty. The closure of Echo Canyon K-8 and Pima Elementary schools brings a sense of loss to our community. These schools have long been places of connection, history, and pride, and their absence will be felt by students, families, and staff alike. We recognize that a repurposing brings new potential and new opportunities, but want to acknowledge the work of the leadership teams of those buildings who are longstanding members and even some who have served our association with pride. As we move forward, the SAA remains committed to supporting our members, our students, and the district as a whole. We recognize that we are entering a challenging phase 2 of discussions, and we approach this work with the spirit of collaboration, professionalism, and resolve. We will continue to work alongside our colleagues and district leadership to ensure that decisions are made thoughtfully, with teamwork at the forefront, and the best interests of our learning community and our district as a whole guiding the way. We are also proud of the work our members do each and every day, leading our schools, supporting our staff, and creating environments where students can thrive. Our focus remains firmly on the future and preparing our amazing students for opportunities and challenges ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, board members. Real quick, if you notice, I have the sling. So about 2 weeks ago, I took a fall. and I did not go to urgent care. So quick plug for Persano and the new healthcare, because at the much lower cost and the very easy, to get in and meet when you can. I don't think I'll be waiting 2 weeks to find out I have 2 broken elbows. So I have a sling on one because it's more broken than the other. So just a quick plug there. First of all, good evening. As I wrap up my first term as SEA president, I wanted to take some time to focus on the accomplishments of our association and district, while also setting the stage for success as we look into future years. First, I want to go back all the way to spring of 2024. SEA in the spring of 24 signed a belief statement calling for 3 things. We called for no increases to employees for health insurance benefits, fair and competitive salary increases as compared to surrounding districts, and a commitment to reducing caseloads, class sizes, to ensure a safer and more supportive teaching and learning environment. We had 1,005 certified employees that signed the belief statement. The governing board's response at that time was to increase the salary increase that year from 1% to 2%. Last year, through the IBN process, we successfully lowered the class size of secondary science lab classes to a maximum of 32. We were also able to give significant stipend increases to special education and CTE teachers. However, the cost of insurance continued to rise over the last 2 school years. Even through the movement of $1 million to offset employee costs of insurance, and district administration opening up premium setting to negotiations with all board-recognized associations, both of which were unprecedented and heavily appreciated. In spring of 2025, SEA signed an insurance petition stating the following: decrease premium costs of employee health insurance plans, ensure there are affordable plans for each category of plan, that being single, spouse, children, and family, and maintaining the same quality of care with the decreased cost. 1,145 certified employees signed the petition. Following that petition, we also had a high participation governing board walk-in at the April 1st governing board meeting, with speakers focusing on personal stories of struggles that we face as employees dealing with these increases. Following these actions, the board called for a request for proposals to look into the best insurance for our employees. In fall of 2025, in another unprecedented event, the governing board heard from all IBN teams to discuss negotiation priorities in public at a meeting. We were able to share overall data and individual cases of hardship caused by insurance increases and compensation below cost of living increases. In late fall, we met as a district and association leaders to review the insurance RFP, and we were able to identify Blue Cross and Blue Shield as the best providers. Further, we again met as leaders to set premium prices. We now have no cost increase to any current insurance plans for next year, and a new insurance plan, or an additional one, that represents real and meaningful savings for our employees. In my eyes, we have met the demands of our employees that were made when I first stepped into the role as president. This year, we met a 2% increase. We made budget cuts without harming certified caseloads and class sizes, and we have lowered insurance costs with better health care. The reason I wanted to go through that short history lesson was to show that what we can do together when we respect each other's voices, concerns, and interests. This year has been very difficult, but we have collectively met the challenge, and I am optimistic that we will continue to meet the challenges we face as long as we listen and value each other. One difficulty of this year was to meet the challenges of working conditions through all the budget concerns that we had. Let's see, lost my place there real quick. To set others up for success in the futures through this challenge, SEA has started elections for our positions on interest-based negotiations, and I'm proud to announce that we've elected 8 leaders to IBN so that we can have 2 teams to engage in talks with the districts. One team will be able to continue to focus on the district budget concerns, while the other would be able to be focused on working conditions and standards and the improvements for our certified staff. We are confident that the district can find members to join this new team and the space to make these improvements happen. I want to thank the governing board and district administration for meeting the needs of our workers and helping make this work so rewarding. Thank you.
Donna? Mr. Buckley? Hey,
Yes.
that was a great update. I really appreciate the insight and the successes. How many members are part of SEA? How many members do you have?
We officially have it's about 575.
Okay, also, how much is your membership fee?
Our membership fee is 800, I believe this year it's 850, which is actually much lower than many of our competitors.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the update. Very exciting.
Thank you.
See. Good evening, President Lewis. Can you hear me? Okay. Good evening, President Lewis, Vice President Sharkey, members of the governing board, and Dr. Menzel and Ms. Wagner. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today and for your continued partnership with SSPA. We would like to begin by acknowledging the collaborative effort with our associations that went into the 2% raise across the board. Through this IBN process, we were able to come together on an increase to base pay that supports all employees. At the same time, this step also highlights the importance of continuing our work, particularly for our classified staff, where wages remain an ongoing concern. As we consider the broader context, the cost of living continues to rise. This serves as an important benchmark as we continue our shared efforts to ensure that compensation keeps pace in a meaningful way. Our classified employees remain the backbone of SUSD. Their consistency, dedication, and daily contributions are critical to the success of our schools. Ensuring that compensation reflects both their values and current economic realities will be an important part of maintaining a strong and stable workforce. Looking ahead to next year's IBN process, we see a clear opportunity and responsibility to build on this year's progress. Continuing to prioritize compensation will be key not only for supporting current employees, but also for retaining and attracting the staff our district depends on. SSPA would also like to recognize the HR department for successfully placing all surplus employees, classified and certified. This was a complex process, and it was carried out with care and coordination. The limited concerns raised to SSPA reflect the thoughtful approach taken, and we appreciate the work behind that effort. Thank you. As we move forward, SSPA remains committed to ongoing collaboration beyond formal IBN meetings. We believe there is value in continuing to refine the classified agreement to ensure clarity and consistency for both employees and the district. For example, we would welcome continued dialogue around other duties as assigned to ensure that expectations remain aligned with employees' primary roles. Also, developing clearer pathways for transfers, lateral moves, and professional development opportunities can help employees feel supported while also strengthening retention across the district. This has been a very challenging year, particularly with repurposing of 2 schools and the possibility of additional changes ahead. We appreciate the collaborative approach taken thus far and recognize that the decisions made moving forward will continue to have a direct impact on employees and school communities. SSPA looks forward to continuing to work alongside the governing board and district leadership to build on our progress and address the areas that still require attention. Thank you for your time and your continued partnership.
Good evening.
Ms.
I'm
hold on,
Patty
Ms. Warner,
Bilberry.
your
and
light's
I-
on. Did you want to speak?
Oh,
Okay, no problem. Please go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I left it on. Thank you very much for the update. Appreciate it.
That's all right. I'm Patty Bilberry, and I am the president of the small but mighty and new Scottsdale District Administrators Association. This past quarter has been a busy and productive one for SDAA. We've had the opportunity to engage in several important areas of work that directly impacts our members and staff across the district. We are proud of the way our team has showed up with focus on collaboration, advocacy, and thoughtful decision-making. One of the most important and significant efforts of this quarter was our participation in the district's insurance RFP committee. Not sure I'd ever want to do it again. SDAA, that's my little insert, SDAA had representation at the table along with the other 3 associations and district leadership. The level of collaboration was awesome. The work remained centered on finding solutions that best serve employees, and the resulting recommendation reflected a balanced approach to benefits that support access, quality, cost, and long-term sustainability. SDAA also actively participated in the insurance premium discussions with the associations and the district. These conversations required careful consideration and navigation of a complex and challenging reality. Even so, the process remained very transparent, respectful, and solutions-oriented, resulting in outcomes we believe represent a huge win for all staff members who enroll in district insurance policies. Our continued work through the IBM process was another key focus. This past year has brought some tough decisions, but it also highlighted the strength of relationships at the table. The work remained respectful, focused, and collaborative, with a shared commitment to listening, problem-solving, and moving forward together for the best interest of all. SDA would be remiss if we did not thank the governing board for their support of the 2% increase in pay for all employee groups. That decision instilled trust, and it also means that you have a meaningful investment in all staff, and that is deeply appreciated. In addition, we want to recognize human resources and district leadership for their work in supporting a smooth transition in employee placement following the 2 school repurposings. Surplus staff members were addressed in a thoughtful and timely manner, ensuring that all staff who wish to remain in the district were successfully placed for the new year. That's a huge accomplishment. SDAA has remained committed to supporting our members in their day-to-day work through communication, responsiveness, and advocacy. Our members' work is often significant and very overwhelming, and it's important that they continue to feel informed, supported, represented, and above all, appreciated. Overall, this quarter highlighted what can happen when people come together with a shared purpose and a willingness to collaborate, even when the work is very difficult. We are grateful for the partnerships at all levels, proud of what we've accomplished together, and look forward to rolling up our sleeves and getting the work done in the years ahead. Thank you.
Any comments or questions from our board? We thank you all and we appreciate you all. The hard work, we know this time of year is extremely intensive, and to stop for another evening out and to have prepared for tonight means a lot. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 4B. We'll be listening to a presentation on the potential of a bond election forthcoming. Do you want to go straight to?
Yes, we'd like to invite Mr. Rayler to the podium, and I just want to say a few words of appreciation for all of the work Mr. Rayler has done over the last few years to make sure that we were prepared for tonight's presentation. The close to 60 meetings individually that he held, in addition to all of the other work, and on top of his day job, is pretty significant. So thank you, Dennis, and we look forward to having the conversation this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Menzel. Okay, we're ready for a marathon. Good evening, President Donna Lewis, Vice President Mike Sharkey, members of the board, Dr. Menzel, and Ms. Wagner. I am thrilled to be here, hoping to get past this little hurdle today, answering a bunch of your questions, and waiting anxiously for May 12th to have yet another discussion. Let me make this big. Oopsie. What happened? IT? Is this a bad omen? No. All right. So tonight, we're going to share with you the work that we've done to get to this point, some work from our friends at Noble Predictive Insights and at Stiefel, that they're going to share with you some PowerPoints that they have, and hopefully get to a point where we are looking at a good position to go for a bond initiative in November of '26. So I have about 46 slides, and I do not seriously want to read every one of them to you. I sent them in advance, so we're going to breeze through some stuff. Obviously, our audience will be able to see it, but why a capital plan? We have to be organized in some way to make sure that we are taking care of our facilities. A facility that air conditioning doesn't work, the roof leaks, the IT doesn't work, whatever the case may be, is a facility that kids aren't learning in. And so that's what we're trying to achieve in this next bond. Last bond in 2016, we rebuilt 6 schools, refurbished one that caught fire. And our focus was really on rebuilding schools. This year or this time around, I feel like it is more important to take care of the infrastructure, the bones of the buildings that will continue to serve our students so that they can have every opportunity to learn, okay? Using my own mouse. So first up is Mike Noble with Noble Predictive Insights. Let me tee up his presentation. Mike?
Thank you, Dennis.
And then just use the arrows.
Perfect. I appreciate it. And I have 82 slides I'm going to take you through. I'm just kidding. I have like 6, so I want to be mindful of your time. So thank you, Dennis. And by the way, it was for being a professional researcher, I was pretty impressed with how much outreach he actually did ahead of it, which was really helpful in the discovery meeting when we put together this survey instrument to test the basically feasibility of the bonds. And I do this with a bunch of other educational organizations such as like Arizona Board of Regents or the major universities or a lot of the other school districts in town. So, but don't tell anybody, but this was the most prepared I've seen anyone come in. So I appreciate it. There's a lot of good insight that we were able to glean upon. And thank you, President Lewis and Superintendent Enzel for having me here. So anyways, with that further ado, let's get into it. This is my 3rd presentation today, so it's like my day job. So, all right, research methodology. We'll start off with the boring stuff first, then we'll get into the fun stuff. So, boring stuff in a sense, more the technical side of it. First off with survey research. What makes a good survey research? Let's start with that. And first is understanding like what makes great survey research, when George Gallup kind of started this way back in the day, is that making sure you have the right composition of your audience, right? And so with your audience, you want to make sure it's reflective of them. So again, am I just getting any person that's coming up, or do I have the right mixture of those folks in there? So for example, the goal of this one was test the feasibility of a bond. Well, last I checked, when a bond goes, it goes and gets put in front of voters. So first off, who's our target audience? Well, you can pick a few, but this one, the best one for that is likely voters, people that are likely to turn out for an election, especially if it's looking potentially in 2026. We're going to want to pick something in a midterm year because not everybody shows up in a midterm. They'll show up in a presidential, just not in a midterm. And so anyway, so we made sure likely voters, we had 408 likely voters from across Scottsdale, and we were in the field March 16th through 20th, so that's the time where we snapped those opinions. And we did it with a mixed mode approach with a bit of opt-in online panel and text online, so phone-based and online. And the main thing is, though, is making sure your sample demographics, which I show up here, are accurately we have the right mixture that reflects that likely voting electorate based on some key demographic criteria, such as like educational attainment, which you notice, like, for example, here in Scottsdale, the likely voters are very much more educated than probably other cities compared to some other ones. Like, we're only 35% have no college degree. I mean, 65% have a college degree. It's pretty impressive. And also look at age, age-wise, which, again, 18 to 29 is a decent group, but again, you see the biggest bulk of it, 65 and older is 31%. Your next biggest group is 45 to 64 is another 29. So right there, you got 6 out of 10 of your voters right there. And then party affiliation as well, because, and again, as I go through some of this stuff, because we're talking about bond feasibility, I'll talk a little bit about Republicans, Democrats, Independents, but know that, again, there's just different teams, different groups that are out there. Again, I'm not advocating or going against any of them. And the final thing about this is the data. It's how do we come up with those numbers? Well, it's through a mixture of the voter file with the Arizona Secretary of State site, but also with census data to get things such as like educational attainment, which the voter file or Secretary of State does not have, but we're able to get it through that. Anyways, making sure it's the right mixture, but if you were to look at the likely electorate, I would say this lines up pretty darn well to it. All right, ready for the fun stuff? Let's go. All right, so first off, what are they all, and by the way, when you see these slides in the bottom middle, you'll see some light gray text. Some of the stuff might be paraphrased up there, but we actually put the exact question verbiage that we're citing the data from. So if you're curious about what that says, so for example, this one, overall, do you think the Scottsdale Unified School District is headed in the right direction or the wrong direction? So what do you think, how you all are doing over there? Interesting is that when we looked at, the total top line up top, and I break out 2 subgroups right there, parents and non-parents, and this is, one of the takeaways from this is that it's not a polarized electorate, it's a segmented one, and those closest to the district are supportive. And you can see that with the parents right there. But those further away are not opposed, they just are a bit more disengaged, as you can see, because in the gray symbolizes that they're not sure, because you either have a positive opinion, negative opinion, or you kind of don't have an opinion, right? And so you see that with a higher rate there. And so, for example, among registered independent voters, independents follow that same pattern, 23% right direction, 28% wrong direction, 50% of them are not sure. Again, a little less engaged. And so the strategic implication of this is that the district does not have a perception problem, it has a relevance problem with some of the non-parents and lower engagement voters. But again, if you think about it, it makes sense because, again, it's maybe not directly impacting them compared to someone that has kids going to school or et cetera that are closer proximity to the district. All right, moving on down. And so property values, so there's different things that we tested throughout here. So one is like, hey, overall, what's their sentiment of the district, where they think it's going. But then also we get into messaging, we do some ballot testing. We actually did 3 ballot tests throughout as we injected more information, and I'll get into that later. But first off is one of the things that in messaging, talking specifically about, that, hey, if there's a school bond, there is going to be some financial impact, right? There's going to be an increase, there's increased tax, but also what are some of the benefits for it is that the most powerful finding in the survey was that there's near universal agreement with the statement, strong public schools help protect and increase property values in Scottsdale. So the top line of that, when respondents, these likely voters in Scottsdale heard that, 93% agreed with that, with only 4% disagreement. I do a lot of message testing. That's about as high as you can get. I've yet to see a message at 100%, to be honest. And so there's even bipartisan agreement, which is incredibly awesome because in this polarized environment, you really can't get them all to agree on anything these days. But you see agreements among Republicans, Democrats, and independents, which is rare. And it had over 90% agreement among parents and non-parents. So this reframes the bond, I think, from a school issue into a community investment. And so that strategic implication here is that parents understand the educational case, but property values is how the district makes that case to everyone else, the people that are less engaged with the district. So moving on is that costs don't break support, but defines the persuasion battle. So this is when we start injecting in some other stuff like question was like if the school bond required the typical Scottsdale homeowner to pay approximately roughly $17 more per month in property taxes, would you support or oppose it? And you notice, so before overall pretty positive, But again, you still have a majority that are on board. So the support still holds, even once you still inject in like, oh yeah, by the way, you're gonna have to pay a little bit more. 60% support, 30% oppose. So 6 and 10 support, which is a pretty good place to be in. But that coalition kind of shifts. Is now parents are at 84% support of the idea of a bond, whereas non-parents, you still have a plurality, not a majority, a plurality, 48% support with 39% in opposition. But Democrats are very much on board, 8 and 10 or 82% support. Independents, those folks in the middle, 43 support, 41 oppose. And those 65 and older, plurality support at 48% with 38% opposition. So this is a strong result, but it introduces a clear line of tension, is that support remains intact but becomes more conditional among non-parents, independents, and older voters. So the strategic implication of this is that cost is not a barrier to passage, but it is where the campaign will be won or lost. And messaging must consistently demonstrate value, necessity, and fiscal discipline. And I'll get more into that as well. Like, what does that look like? So first off is like funding priorities, right? So support is broad, but it strengthens the more voters are educated about like what the bond does. So the bond performs strongly in both abstract and detailed testing. So I realized I probably could have added that slide, but they told me to keep it short. So, so I'll verbally tell you. So note that it didn't show, at least on the slides, we didn't show slides due to time, but we tested the concept of, Scottsdale Unified School District, school bond at the beginning, and then giving them a little bit of information about the bond, what it actually funds, but no costs were tested yet. And in both those initial concept, it was 70% approval of Scottsdale voters, likely voters, but then 73% after some details were given. So in both instances, both were very popular when talking about the concept and the idea. And so the strongest funding priorities, though, are clear. So of the different aspects of it, which ones are maybe resonate better, or do they think the bigger pain points are? Like, so when asking these funding priorities to the voters, like, do they think if it was, they indicated in blue up there in the chart, they said it was too much funding. If it was green, it was about right. And then yellow is that said, hey, there's not enough funding there. We got to get more dollars in there. Of course, gray is not sure. They didn't have an opinion. And so the strongest funding priorities were clear when we asked voters. It was that school safety, school 33% said there's not enough funding. That's a big one. But then classroom technology was right up there at 34%. And additionally asked a separate question just on modernizing facilities separate from this question. And 97% said modernizing, maintaining facilities is important. So what Dennis was talking about just before, like, hey, the bones of this may not sound super great, but like it's important, and also the voters see it as important as well. So the strategic implication is that the district should lean into the specifics, and the strongest case is kind of built around safety, technology, and modern facilities. Because again, you have all these things here. Can you really talk about all of those things at once? Usually you only have a limited amount of time. So if you're gonna have to pick, areas to focus on, those would be the ones that will resonate the most. All right, the one you've all been waiting for. So now as we take them through because again, survey research, or at least how we conduct it, it's kind of like game theory, right? So when you go through, you start off very broad, but as you inject information, but you kind of wait till the very end of what you're actually getting at, which I think is, the bond, right? And feasibility. And again, what should the bond look like? Should this be a 5-year bond? Should this be a 10-year bond? What should the amount be? Should we do a lower amount, higher amount? If we do the higher amount, or like, if we do the lower amount, is it incredible support and then just support drops off a cliff once you go up to the higher amount? Is there sticker shock, et cetera? But anyways, we're able to test that stuff out ahead of time so you can guess or you can know. So when looking at the funding levels, is that first is $350 million was the first one tested, which 67% said yes. If the sticker price was $350 million, yes, I'm on board, with only 22% no. So it's kind of a slam dunk on that one. But then saying, hey, the $475 million, which you could do a lot with that, is that 54% said yes. So you did have some drop in support, but not off the cliff as one might expect. So 54% yes, 30% no, 16% were undecided. And the higher amount is clearly softer, but it remains viable. And critically, when you're looking at that higher amount, parents were at 76% yes, so much higher than the baseline. Democrats were at 72%, but even Republicans, who are typically more fiscally prudent compared to some of the other demographic groups out there is that even 54% or majority of them were in favor as well. So the presence of that 16% undecided at the 475 million is important because these voters are not locked into opposition and they represent a persuadable universe. And that strategic implication is like roughly 350 million is the safe option, but 475 million is definitely not out of reach. And with a disciplined, campaign or messaging, how it's packaged. And again, I know you guys don't do all that. Other powers that be may do that. And the district has a credible path to securing funding closer to its full need. We found it. And also, I got to mention that I didn't have time to put in here. We also tested another part of the survey where we tested about some of the school closures, right? That made some news, et cetera. So we went in there. One, we found out two things. One is awareness was high. Likely voters in Scottsdale were aware of the schools closures. Like people were aware of it. It was interesting when testing of the reason of why they were closed, saying, hey, like because of costs, et cetera, like not really being used. Again, it's just more efficient. Basically what the district's been talking about. We saw that a lot of voters were saying, yeah, that makes sense. So I guess one of the questions was like, hey, should that be a big concern or keeping you up at night? Not really, basically, was one of the takeaways from that. And then finally here, key takeaways, and then of course I'll answer any questions, which I'm sure you have some, is that, all right, so with the data, basically when going through this is that the data presents a clear path forward from all the different aspects, not just asking like, hey, just the bond question. Again, the question is, what are the parts that are the people really care about? Is it viable? And also, how are you going to get there? And what do people want to know and hear? And so a bond is absolutely feasible. And so the support is strong at every stage of testing, and closures are not a liability, the school closure part that I verbally referenced. And the district's core coalition is highly supportive. And the key strategic dynamic is expansion. So parents and Democrats provide a strong base, but non-parents, independents, and older voters require a little bit of more reassurance and relevance of why it applies to them. And again, kind of going back to that property values, like, hey, this is good for your property values. So you may not have a dog in the fight, but you actually kind of do. And so the recommended approach is kind of, at least from the research, is that I would say like the one, it's almost too easy, frankly, at that lower amount. I mean, frankly, I think the research suggests on my end is that I'd recommend probably more of the 5-year bond for the timing. So 10-year, 5-year. 5-year was seen as a bit more viable. Plus 10-year, it's hard to probably gauge out what things are going to look like in 10 years. So strongly consider pursuing, though, a funding level near the upper range of 475 million. I think is very palatable. And also anchor the messaging in safety, classroom technology, modern facilities, and property values. And the position the board as a responsible, time-limited investment. So leverage parents as validators and mobilizers, and with the right message and campaign structures, Scottsdale Unified School District is well positioned to not only pass a bond, but to secure the level of funding it is seeking in the future of your students. Anyways, the most important slide here, that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, what was the raw number of surveys?
Oh, of respondents, it
Yes.
was 408.
Thank you.
And likely voters. And to think about this, you have the overall general population, right, 18 plus, but again, we're talking about a bond, so voting, then you snap that down, registered voters gets about this big. Now we're talking about likely voters, it's about that big. So again, it's a more targeted group. I've seen folks where they've done it with registered, but frankly, if you're trying to make strategic decisions, you want to go directly with the decision makers. And if you did, let's say, any of those universes outside of that, I think you could be going off some bad numbers, basically.
Members of the board?
You've done this before with different districts in Arizona,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
So the 2 slides before the support comparison, the numbers that you see, how does that square with research you've done in the past and then seeing the outcomes? How, I guess today's wording, what would you put the Kalshi contract at for passing for this?
This is Kalshi. It's funny. I'm doing like a 10-minute interview tomorrow on predictive markets. It's funny. Anyways, Kalshi. I can't get out of a room when people ask me about it. No, I was kidding.
Talking like 91-cent contracts?
Yeah,
Or
right.
60-cent contracts?
I don't partake in those things. But when it comes to Where the numbers are, I think you're, compared to other districts I've been, from my experience, I think you all are in a very good position. Again, we kind of tested 2 levels, like it was really, because again, you could test like 7 different levels, but then you're just giving way too many options of folks, and it's like, hey, if there's a $30 million difference, it's hard to really take it away. So really, you want to take usually your floor and kind of your ceiling. So like, hey, what's kind of like what we need, like, or like basic to get by, or like, what do we want, right? Like an ideal world. And of course in there, and so like, I think anywhere in that 400 million range, I think you're in a good spot, frankly. And what I've seen in the past with folks at the same type of numbers, you're good. The one part that I can't predict is, again, how the folks will end up going out there, because let's say you put it on there, there's usually some groups that will go then and back that, support, I can't, ensuring that if they can stick on the messaging, I think they'll be just fine. But if they go, off kilter and other things, like I can't control that aspect. But based on the numbers I see, is that I think you guys are in a good spot, and that my clients have had great success with it.
And I know all politics are local, but if I recall, this past November, just looking around Maricopa,
Bonds it pretty well.
more passed than
Yep.
did, not by a huge margin, but in
Nope.
general more. Is that trending in that direction? Like, what are you seeing as far as the last few years?
We're seeing a trend back. People want to invest in education right now. Before, they weren't doing as well on the bond ballots. But also, I think part of it too is just messaging it correctly. Like for me, from my perspective, I think one of the core messages go with like, hey, an investment in the schools is an investment for homeowners and for Scottsdale. Like I think that's a huge message to put in, especially those folks that don't have a dog in the fight. So yeah, I think the trend is turning, especially with AI, et cetera. I think people are really starting to notice the need for interactive education with real humans. So
Thank you.
That too.
Ms. Warner?
Thank you. Hi, Mr. Noble.
Hey, Ms.
Thanks for
Warner.
being.
Pleasure.
Could you send us the actual questions you did? I just looked
Yeah.
through my emails. I didn't see them. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no, we have all that just because of time.
I get it.
There's a ton more, and if you ever want, I'm happy to walk you through all that. But yeah, happy to show all that stuff. But it wasn't anything. Let's just say the result, like we weren't gauging, because when you do these things, you have to shoot it down the middle. Like you can't sit there and like, oh, I'm trying to get to this result, because that's how bad things happen, especially when you're making big decisions that impact a lot of families and students. So anyways, yeah, happy to share all that, and you can dissect it all you like.
Thank you.
Happy to do.
Thank you.
Ms. Carney?
Thank you for that. I just have a question. Have you ever done this for Scottsdale Unified before?
No, because it's 10 years since Bond, and I've been doing this professionally for 2 decades, so I don't think they'd hire a 30-year-old. So, but now I got enough gray hair and receding hairline that I think I qualify. But no, we've done work. Like I said, a lot of our school have done a ton in the education space, anywhere from Arizona Department of Education, did about $500,000 of research with them, did a ton of stuff with the Board of Regents. I've worked with ASU, U of A, and like Board of Regents, by the way, the research, all the universities have to sign off, and they're all like tier 1 research institutes, so it's a little nervous, but it worked out. And but yeah, so I've done a lot in this space, in and around education, public policy, and also we're nonpartisan too, so we don't bat for any of those other teams.
Okay, great. I just have a question for Dr. Menzon then on why we saw a need to spend. I know we spent $16,000 on this. The PO is $24,000. Are we looking to spend more? And why did you feel this was a good use of funds?
So in my past experience, before you're going to ask the voters to make a significant investment, it's important to understand what voter sentiment is. And before you bring something before the governing board, you want to be able to provide exactly what Mr. Noble did tonight in terms of the feasibility of even proceeding. There are certain environments where you don't get over a 50% threshold, and so you could pursue the bond proposal, but without a likelihood of success. So you spend a lot of time and energy. I thought it was really important for the governing board to have data with respect to not only the need, which Dennis will talk about later, but also the feasibility of the ask. And so for something that's between 350 and 475 million, 16,000 to 24,000 seemed like a reasonable expense to get that information.
And may I inject, Ms. Carney, is that should have been 24,000, but Mr. Menzel apparently is a shrewd negotiator, and anyways, got quite a good deal on it. So, anyways, money back to
Dr.
the taxpayers.
Yeah, two quick questions. One, as you described sort of kind of how parents respond is an important cut of the data. When you say parents, do you mean about 45% of our families with school-age children don't attend SUSD schools, they attend other schools. So when you say parents, are you talking about SUSD parents or
Nope.
all parents?
All parents, all
Okay.
parents. So anyone with children under 18 residing at home is what we would.
Irrespective of the
Yeah,
school they go to.
correct.
So I think that's a very helpful
Correct,
fact.
yeah. We didn't ask, I mean, you probably could have in hindsight asked if they were district parents or not, but it was just anyone 18 or under children, so whether they're going private, charter, et
Yeah,
cetera.
so I think that's a helpful fact.
Yeah.
Or a positive
question.
fact. And then the
Yeah.
second question, when you think about the funnel of sort of all residents and then registered and then likely,
Yeah.
you know, as a New Yorker who's come to vote by mail here and it's like 5 pages and you get to the end, is there any research on kind of the difference in profile of people who vote on bond questions specifically within the overall ballot? In other words, is there a lot of drop-off from the top of the ballot
There's
to those
some-
final questions? And is there a particular swing in profile of who actually
Yeah,
votes on?
there's some drop off. Like, let's be honest, like this year, the big ticket, since we don't have president on the ballot, also we don't have, we had 5 U.S. Senate elections in a row, which, you know, they spent hundreds of millions of dollars on those things. So we don't have any U.S. Senate elections either. So the highest profile one is governor. You do see some drop off when you get to the bond question. But they're typically more like the seasonal voters that typically don't come out. And that's why, for example, when we go and ask about these questions, we want to make sure we're talking to people that we're like with 90% certainty that they're going to come out and vote. And especially like in a midterm year, which is what we, you know, look for, is that we want to make sure not only based on their vote history, but also them self-verifying. That's kind of a double verification process, make sure they get in there. And so demographically, again, it's a little more fly-by-night because you just have inflow and outflow of different demographics. Like they'll change from each election to next. So from my experience is that, you know, you'll see some drop off, but not a ton. I mean, a lot will get down to the bond. That's why, again, when you ask, like, you don't do registered voters or you do folks that are kind of might be showing up, et cetera. Like, we're basically testing folks like, we're like pretty positive no matter what happens, they're voting either way. So, and again, with that, they're a pretty consistent group.
Thank you.
I don't need this tonight, but if you might be able to get to the governing board, maybe Dennis or Dr. Menzel, the history of our past bond elections, proportionate win. If you have it on the tip of your tongue, great, but if not,
I don't have it on the tip of my tongue, but I do have it in a file in my computer, so we'll get that sent out.
send that out to us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments from the board? Thank you, Mr. Noble. Thank you, Dennis. Anything you want to add? Are you bringing us to closure? Ha, there's more?
You think there's closure?
Thank you.
Yep.
Kids take care of.
Yes. We-
So we will now move on to Randy and Megan.
Yeah.
You got your questions for Mike, and now we'll move on to the tax implications of passing a bond.
And while they come up, just want to point out that Randy is an Arcadia alum, and Megan has a student at Hopi, and Randy also went to Hopi. So they have Scottsdale connections.
So we have a dog in the fight. Good evening, President Lewis, Vice President, good evening, President Lewis, Vice President Sharkey, members of the board, Dr. Menzel. I'm Megan Burke, Randy Stein. Thank you for having us here this evening. We have the pleasure of going over tax implications and kind of summarizing what Noble Predictive just presented to you and kind of the cost of doing that. And I'm short over here, so hopefully you can see me. How do I move it? There we go. All right. This is the history of the district's tax rates. This is broken down for the last 10 years. Total tax rate. The primary tax rate is that the golden or orange bar. That is your M&O tax rate. Then you have the next three colors, your maroon, gray, and blue. Those are made up, the blue is the bonds, the maroon and gray are your DAA and your M&O overrides. There are a couple years in there where you see DSEG, and that's flip-flopped from year to year. Sometimes it's in the primary, sometimes it's in the secondary. So we've kind of highlighted the last couple years, the DSEG is fallen into the secondary category. To note a couple things here, the last time there was a bond election was in 2016. So the first time that bond, that $229 million, we sold it in phases, but the first time that $220 million bond hit, the tax rate would have been in that 16-17 fiscal year. So you see that in the blue section there. Kind of stayed in that 40 to 50 cent range over time. The last bond sale under the 2016 bond election was in 2021, so in that fiscal 2021 bar. So you'll see kind of there's been a decline in your bond tax rate over time because at that point in time, all bonds were sold under the former bond authorization. The other thing I think just to note is your total tax rate kind of stayed constant from 22 to 23 with the even with the increase in your DAA. So you went out that in November of 2022, kind of with your increase in your DAA right there. So that kind of stayed constant. Dr. Lewis, you asked a question, and down below, this is your successful passage rate, so we can get you the history as well on other elections that were unsuccessful, but here is the successful history of all of your M&O override, DAA override, and bond elections. This is just a quick snapshot of the district's debt currently outstanding, roughly about $30 million annually. Blue bars are your principal repayment. Maroon is your interest component. Existing debt, all the debt that was sold previous to the 2016 election and then the 2016 authorization, all that debt is paid off by fiscal 2036, 2037. Randy's also going to jump in here with me, but what we did based on conversations with both Shannon and Dr. Menzel is to try to summarize some scenarios for you based on the research that Noble Predictive did. So we ran, the first scenario is at $375 million. The second scenario is at $395 million. And the third scenario is at $475 million. And this is a summary of the tax implications of each of those bond programs. Each of those scenarios were for a 5-year period, so sales in 2027, 2029, and 2031, as mentioned in the previous presentation. What you see over on the right, the expected tax rate of bonds outstanding, that's the expected tax rate of your debt that is currently outstanding based on an assumed assessed valuation growth. So with no additional bond program, that is what we would estimate your tax rate for bonds, not your total tax rate, but your tax rate for bonds to be over the next 11 years. Then scenario 1, scenario 2, and scenario 3 kind of lay out what the tax implications would be under a $375 million, $395 million, and $375 million. So with the additional, for instance, with the additional $375 million, if scenario 1 was kind of the presumed or assumed number to go out for, your tax implication in 2027, 2028 would be an additional 12 cents. The bottom number below is an average tax rate, so that's an average increase of what the cost of the bond program is. 395 average tax is 27 cents, and 475 is 33 cents. Brandy, have I missed anything that you think I should point out here?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
So those numbers that we saw on the bottom of the previous page, the average tax rate is a key number because that is carried through in the voter pamphlet. That's not the tax rate each year. It is the average for each of those new programs. Here you're looking at the information for the $375 million program on the left-hand side. This is just to identify the tax impact in that top bar. You see the impact on a $100,000 home as well as the average value home in the district. These are for tax purposes, not the what you think you can sell it for price, but how the assessor values these properties to identify, using that average tax rate, what the annual impact is. So for the average home in the district, the annual impact is approximately $157, $13.10 per month. Similar for the commercial property, and then also for the agricultural or vacant property. All right, there you go. And so this is, we've got this example. It's the exact same example for each of the scenarios. Here you have it for the $395 million scenario, the average tax rate being the 27 cents, carried through the exact same table. For the $100,000 house, $27 per year, and for the average value house in the district, that $165 per year, $13.81 per month. And then finally, for the 475 million scenario, you see the average tax rate of that 33 cents at the top and carried through to on that table. I want to also take a minute and discuss the unique real estate circumstances that most of the state is facing. This is for fiscal 26. You saw the average value home at about $607,000 for fiscal 27. I'm showing you fiscal 26 here. It was approximately $570,000 for tax purposes. What we've done is we have found 3 actual houses in the district that are valued by the assessor at approximately that average level. For each of those properties, we're then identifying the assessor full cash value, which in assessor world, they consider to be akin to market value, but it is commonly known to be about 85% of market value, give or take, various parts of the state, various years. And then I've got a very scientific method. I probably learned it at Arcadia High School, Zillow. But what I'm attempting to show you here, Zillow is a stand-in for market value. This is not always the case, but what I'm attempting to show you here is that the value for tax purposes right now, because of the conditions of real estate and what's been happening in the real estate market literally for 10 years, there is a huge gap between the market value of property in most parts of the state and the value for that is used for tax purposes. Seemingly somewhat important to convey so people can properly analyze the impact of a proposed bond program. Which one? Just a quick look for you just at the election cycle. We're sort of getting into the period of the year where school districts that are planning to do elections in November are doing the exact same thing you are, contemplating, and ultimately will or won't make the decision to call for an election. Of course, this won't surprise you. Of course, the statutes are a little bit confusing on this point. The whole thing works a lot more smoothly if the district calls for the election by mid-May. There is a later drop dead time, but it does make the provision of the public notices a lot more cumbersome and confusing. So typically, school districts are in the April-May timeframe making that consideration. Once the resolution has been adopted by the governing board, part of that resolution is to transmit authority to your district administration to work with the county elections department, to work with bond counsel, and to work with us to complete the information that is needed for the voter information pamphlet. As you're well aware, despite the fact that Election Day is November 3rd this year, it is 35 days before November 3rd that voter information pamphlets are mailed out, and it is just a very short week later that the mail-in ballots are mailed out. So the whole thing is really happening by late September or early October. I think that's what we've got for you. We're certainly happy to answer any questions, our Stiefel team, and we have a nice disclosure.
Mr. Sharkey?
Thank you for this, appreciate the detail. In trying to anticipate a message to a homeowner, the numbers of it'll be an extra, $16 a month, on your, or whatever, depending. Given the 2016 bond, is there a drop-off? Is there an amount of money that will no longer show up on your bill because it's ending?
Yep. So, to answer your question, yes. So back here on this chart, the 2016 bond, if there was no future bond issued, the 2016 bond would pay off by 2037. So that is this green box
So
here.
nothing is, if we do nothing today with the new bond, next year, nothing changes for me, not until 2037 will I see a change because of the previous bond.
Right. You'll see a slight decline. Do you see the sense here? You'll see a slight decline each and every year. The other reason that's also happening, though, is we're assuming assessed valuation growth because
Right.
you've had continued assessed valuation growth. So as that assessed value growth occurs and your debt, let me go back, your debt slightly declines each and every year, you would see a slight decline in your current bond tax rate until it would pay off, and the final maturity of all of those bonds is in 2037.
Right, so it's a 20-year payoff on this 2016 bond.
What statute says is when you issue a bond, and here we've contemplated, you see we've assumed scenarios in 27, 29, and 31. Each one of those series of bonds cannot be under statute more than 20 years. So the repayment of the debt would be anywhere between 15 and 20 years of each of those bonds, correct?
So that's part of the messaging too. If you vote yes on this bond, if it happens, you're saying you're going to pay whatever the number, $13 a month for the next 15, 20 years?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Not sure if you're the right folks to direct this question to, but can you speak to the investor side of bond issuances? We heard kind of how voters are thinking about it on the supply side, but what is the demand side now for school district bonds?
It's very heavy. We've sold several bond issues in the last month, several bond issues that have been in over $100 million for schools, and we have had 6 times level of subscriptions, meaning there was $600 million of orders put in for $100 million in bonds. These are big bond funds that are buying these, so the demand is very there. The interest rates are very attractive to bond investors, so there's high demand on that side of things. There's a lot of money going into the muni market, so bond inflows, given kind of the fluctuation in the stock market, the equity markets, there's been a lot of money that's been by bond investors put into the muni market, so that's one of the reasons also.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Meg.
Thank you.
So they've covered a little bit of history, but I wanted to share for those that have never seen a bond pamphlet, what we did in 2016. The bond is specific enough to identify the different places that you will spend money. And so we will, on our May 12th meeting, have the new pamphlet wording for you to review. Couple things to point out is security was identified back then, and it'll be identified this next go-around. Technology and security, as you'll see in a few slides, very much are hand in hand. Without one, you cannot have the other. Security rides on the network, requires all of the things that our information technology department has to offer. So we may choose to put that question together or that verbiage together so that the security and information technology is all one amount. You'll see that there was an amount set aside for transportation. And most importantly for me on this next election is this last line for administrative capital improvements. We have not done any administrative capital improvements of any significance for the 10 years that I've been here. It has not, in my known knowledge, ever been on a bond ballot. And so that is something that I want to talk to you about in a later slide about the dollars that I think we need to tie to. Now, I came up to the podium for a quick minute a couple months back, and we talked about Cholla and Apache and the abysmal shape that they're in. I would prefer that I don't leave a legacy of buildings that are not worthy of human occupancy. And so I would like to have a number in that administrative capital improvement. We do not intend on any extra square footage or building a Taj Mahal. We simply want to take care of the buildings that we have. This is the trifold that was created by our communications department last time around. This time we will not have a capital override, but it gave a breakdown to help better understand in a very handy way how much the bond was going to cost and how it was laid out, which we'll be able to do that again for this next one. And then, very nicely done, they were able to identify all the different kinds of projects at every school, so someone had a reference that, hey, my school's getting security upgrades, or my school's getting PE enhancements or something like that. So this particular document, I used it all the time. As we were progressing through from 2017 when I took over till now, I've shown this document again and again and again, and everyone seems to have a pretty nice appreciation for it because it is pretty self-explanatory. So, as Dr. Menzel mentioned, in August, Dr. Dansky was my first victim at Arcadia High School for our capital planning meeting. Unfortunately, it didn't go well, was not well attended, so we did a redo, and at that point it was much, much better attended with a lot of great input from that staff. 59 meetings. Each campus was afforded an opportunity to have 2 meetings, one for staff, one for parents. The parent meetings were hot and cold. Some of them had just a couple of parents, others had 40 or 50 parents. So it really just depended on the campus, depended on the parent involvement. Most of the time we did them around 6 p.m., so try getting past dinner time and allow people to come. But in today's day and age of soccer and piano and dance and everything else, I can understand where parents get busy. So the following slides are just 3 examples, a high school slide, a middle school slide, and an elementary school slide of what we did with Menti.com. And I took this information, and you all got an email earlier in the week, and I took all of this information from Mentimeter, dropped it into ChatGPT. They turned it into an executive summary for me, and it is absolutely uncanny. And I'm going to share each one of those executive summaries with the principal and for them to share with their community and their staff. But the things that are said in this document ended up in that executive summary, and now we've been working to build the bond so that it's reflective of all of that work and all that input. So this was Desert Mountain High School. Plumbing and air conditioning, no big surprise. Bathrooms are mentioned a lot. Security, the front side of Desert Mountain, if you're familiar with Desert Mountain, there's really no outside perimeter fencing. There's side doors on the east and the west that have no security fencing on them. So that was a big concern for that staff. Mojave Middle School, cafeteria, I'm not exactly sure what's wrong with that cafeteria, but we're going to find out. And because it's a great cafeteria, and it was partly probably because they did not rebuild that building. That's not a 2012 construction. That's an older building. And so there's some work to be done in the kitchen, and we'll talk a little bit about our facility condition assessment that manages through all the cafeteria, kitchen work. Technology, raining in the office, small roof leak, but obviously it irritated that person enough to put it on there. The gym floor, we actually just recently redid the gym floor. We recently redid the air conditioning on the gym, painted the gym, and so that gym is now in really good shape, but the locker rooms and some of the other areas around that building still need some work. Sequoia Elementary School, and I know that in your executive summaries that you got, you did not get a Sequoia, mostly because ChatGPT started changing the format on me. I went to the bathroom, came back, put the information in, and poof, it's all different. So I just skipped that, and I'll get that to you guys. And the school, of course. Shaded parking is always popular, although they have shaded parking, so we'll have to figure out how we can make more parking. And some of these things that landed on here, I have to go through with a fine-tooth comb to better understand what it is that they're asking. But that campus had a $2 million parking lot project done where we had a traffic engineer come in, rework the parking lot, built the back parking lot. And so it is light years better than it used to be. But when you have 400, 500 parents showing up to pick up their kids, that's going to create a traffic jam any way you look at it. So, pardon me, my allergies have been just absolutely nuts lately, and I just can't seem to break this cycle. Questions on that?
First, thank you for your work. I've had the chance to visit a number of schools in the DM community, and one of the questions I asked during the tour is, talk about the physical plant, your needs, and they all sing your praises and appreciate the way that you've engaged them and how it's reflected. I cut the data around how we'd use the bond money in a few ways, and the one way that I didn't do it, which was sort of a dumb moment, is aligned to the polling around what voters are most comfortable with, right, which we talked about earlier. And it strikes me when I look at the uses, some kind of line up, security obviously does. It didn't strike me that a lot of what's discussed here is technology, and a lot of what's discussed here isn't necessarily instructional, or at least not in the most kind of direct sense of the term. That isn't to say it's not needed and not the right things to do, but I'm curious, how do you think about going back to the slide on the pamphlet and the color-coded, here's what we're doing in all your schools, how do you think about these uses versus what, a voter prioritizes in terms of physical plan. In other words, you know, selling toilets and shaded parking.
So that is why, and you'll see that a little bit later on, we don't just do the physical plant stuff because that's not exciting to anybody. There's no one that's going to sing my praises because I replaced the toilet, except
Actually, a lot of
for
people would. But
maybe John Andrews up there at Desert Mountain. But generally speaking, the stuff that we do is not that exciting. Now, if they didn't have air conditioning in August and we had a rental unit and we finally got it working, well, they might be pretty excited about it. But depending on when we're asking, they might be less excited about it. So you're going to see the way I've laid out my Excel spreadsheet, what I think is absolutely necessary, and then the things that people want for their buildings. And that is all based on the information that we got by doing all of these meetings.
And it sounds like part of kind of the art along with the science is those sort of core infrastructure asks, but also sprinkling into them other really valuable, useful things, but with an eye towards kind of their attractiveness to the voter. Is that the right way to think about it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
We want to make sure that every school is touched. We don't want to leave out any school, even the brand-new schools. Pueblo will still need some things. It won't be nearly as much as, say, Redfield or Laguna, but we want to make sure that everyone can recognize, hey, that's my school, and this is the work that they're going to do at my school. I need to get up and go fill up my ballot.
And then the question that I guess is the elephant in the room is we're in a phase 2, and as part of phase 2, there's uncertainty around kind of which buildings are going to be used in which ways and at what level of capacity and so on. So how do you think that through? You know, I presume it would be embarrassing to put forward requests associated with schools that then end up being closed or repurposed away from active use.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. That's a great question. And we are all painfully aware of trying to ask for a bond, trying to identify the projects that are necessary, and knowing that we may or may not close, repurpose, do something else with that building. I think if you go back to, and if I may divert for just a second, when I took over the bond in 2017, the Bond Oversight Committee was absolutely adamant that we show every ounce of work that we did, every project, every PO, every invoice, everything. And that is currently housed in our Smart Sheet document, still available to the public for them to go look. We're working on closing it out and getting all the dollars accounted for. But it's super important as we go in that direction because the timing really is imperfect. We're going to ask for the opportunity to go for a bond, but we're also going to be talking about possibly closing another school or 2 or 3 or whatever it is. So that phase 2 work in that discussion is ongoing right now.
Hand in glove.
And it's just, that's the difficult part. If you go into that spreadsheet, that Smart Sheet document, there's a lot of projects in red that are projects that were never on the original bond. And so we made sure we accounted for even the projects that weren't asked for. And so this case, we would have to, if we're asking for dollars for a school that ultimately gets repurposed, we would have to then account for those dollars in one way, shape, or form. I can tell you with every bit of confidence that we could ask for $700 million and not have enough money to get it all done.
So I want to just address the question a little differently. There is a cost for maintaining the district asset, whether or not it's used as a school. So envision a school that comes offline in 27, 28, you still need to take care of the roof. You still need to make sure that the HVAC system is functional. What you don't do is you don't invest in the other things that are the nice-to-haves as though it were going to be occupied. And so there's a balance there. So knowing before voters cast their ballot in October, or as close to that as possible, which buildings will be coming offline allows us to provide assurance. And we don't have any rebuilds proposed here. And so I think that would be the most obvious thing is if you rebuilt a school and then didn't use it, that would be the concern. But you calibrate the amount of the investment based on the intended need. And so the primary investment will be in the schools that are going to be full and thriving. And then the additional potential investment is the minimum necessary to protect the taxpayer asset.
And what we put in the case has flexibility, I guess, is the short answer.
Yes, that's
If
where.
it ended up, we would just reuse
Yes.
those dollars elsewhere.
Mr. Sharkey?
On the bathrooms, they come up a lot. We hear about it from SAB, rightfully so. In setting expectations, how much will money fix the bathroom issue versus it's a behavioral issue and we spend money and then next year they're, vandalized again? I just want to understand it. And not going to solve the problem today, but just from an investment standpoint, is this it'll fix a lot of the problems, or is it more behavioral that money won't quite fix?
Stop laughing. So, behavior is a big part of it. I send pictures to cabinet all the time. I don't know if we shared with the governing board, at one point, our plumbers took 10 combination padlocks out of the sewer, and we had to cut out a 6x4 section of concrete in the boys' locker room to access those 10 locks. And so behavior is a big part of it. But we've seen more failure in cast iron pipe in the last probably 3 years than I've seen in my 30 years in schools. Cast iron is failing at an alarming rate. It could be the soil that it's planted in.
How old are those cast iron?
So at Desert Mountain High School, it's 30 years old, okay? So we're seeing cast iron failing at a pretty alarming rate at Desert Mountain High School. We have a location by J600 at Chaparral High School that's got a cast iron pipe that is corroded to the point. We have a cast iron pipe section, about 20-foot section, that we replaced at Tonalea for the fire main. So it's not just sewer, it's not just water supply, it's all different things.
So the investment will help a lot of the foundational problems. It
Absolutely.
won't solve everything because of behavior, but it will definitely improve things.
Absolutely.
Okay,
And
thanks.
the dollars that we spend in M&O fixing those, if we could just use the bond money to get it all fixed, then the expectation is we'd have 25, 30 more years before we'd start messing with that again.
Thanks.
Okay, so, Dr. Patinsky, I'll address your question even a little bit more once we get to the spreadsheet for the bond. Next up, campus security. Campus security is probably more important now than I've ever experienced it. It seems like every other day there's something in the news about bad happenings on campus. And so I'm going to invite Josh Friedman up to walk through his campus security.
Good evening, and thanks for letting me come speak. The things that we're looking to upgrade, first of all, is our notification systems. This encompasses things that are not part of the emergency systems, but used every day, such as bells, paging, the classroom audio enhancements that the teachers use to amplify their voice in the classrooms. But then it also brings into account the systems are all compatible now for wearable alerting and the emergency management lockdown systems. And new things that we're going to bring in is visual emergency signage. So for kids that are hard of hearing, or if we have loud rooms like cafeteria, gymnasiums, lights that go off currently, all we have is the audible alert. So that's some of the stuff that we're looking at. And then our camera systems, more than 50% of our cameras are past their life expectancy at more than 9 years old. Typically, you want to try technology moves so fast as quick as we put stuff in there, it's outdated, but our cameras especially, our cameras that we have today, more than 50% of them cannot even use AI overlays, as I'm sure many of you have heard about, where AI can now help look at various things through cameras to help with investigations. Our cameras can't do it. We've tried because they are so old that they can't even take an overlay from an external source. So that's one of the things that we want to upgrade with the cameras. And then the last big piece is access control. We would like to do things to allow for quicker response in emergency, meaning we can lock doors right away. We can, the system that we have has been in place for over 9 years, and the company will not do any additional upgrades to the system. So we're looking to go, one second. We're looking to add some new access control systems that will allow for automation with our a lot of our technology systems that we're not manually entering people as they get hired. It would automatically link with our Active Directory, and accountability for the doors and the users and which doors are left open and not left open, and then the ability with one button to lock down a school immediately as opposed to having to use a key or do some other method. So those are the big things that we're looking to do with this bond. And Dennis, there we go. So the security piece for this, at the 15 elementary schools, you can see the costs in there. 8 middle schools and the 5 high schools is roughly $51 million for the security piece of this. All of the security enhancements, as was said before, will not be possible without upgrading our information technology piece, because everything that we do rides on our network and our systems. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Harrington.
I do have a question, though, on the security piece. I don't know if you can answer this or someone else can, but are we doing anything to help the schools that have mentioned to me when I'm touring them, when they've got open glass windows at the classrooms? I think it's Pueblo is one, right? There are a lot of glass. Are we doing anything in the bond to better protect those classrooms or do anything different? Did that come up for any of the schools? Because I know when I tour, it has.
You'll see in a later slide that I've got window coverings in there, and,
Okay.
and we'll be doing some combination of different things to enhance our windows.
Enhance or for security measure?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Good evening, everyone. We were talking a lot, Dr. Patinsky, I heard you mention technology. This is not student devices. This is not this projector and screens. This is the network upgrades that run everything operationally, the teaching and learning, the safety and security. Every bullet point that Josh just took us through is reliant upon a network. Right now, those cameras are not a reality in our system, quite honestly, because we don't have switches that have the PoE, the power, the data to be able to support those. So that is how we get to now this breakdown as it relates to the technology infrastructure that really powers performance in our district. Again, relating to teaching and learning, every classroom, every device, classroom audio amplification, as you heard Josh mention, safety and security cameras, access control, those alerts and lockdowns. But even from an operations standpoint, now all of our phones are on the internet, our HVAC systems are on the on the network as well. So it truly does touch every different aspect of our business enterprise as well as the education system. So the problem we must solve is that we also have a number of legacy systems that are end of life. Many of them will be end of life in the coming school year. So those are items that will need to be addressed. We have wireless access points is probably one of the few things you could see in this room that would be addressed as part of this bond, but wireless access system, points, and then additionally switches, servers. These are things that typically have a lifespan, a refresh cycle of 4 to 6 years. We stretch it to 8 to 9. In some cases, we've had a server go 11 years. It is not ideal. We had a server at Redfield die this year. Not on a Saturday or a Sunday, not over winter break, but on a school day. Thankfully, we actually did have another server in the warehouse that we could turn to because we've already been working to refresh some of these things. But typically, you don't just have servers sitting on a shelf. They're expensive, and once you buy them, the warranty starts ticking away. So having this sort of refresh cycle in place will hopefully help prevent some of those unfortunate last-minute immediate needs. Also, there is an increased risk of cybersecurity risks, malware, virus attacks if we're dealing with some end-of-life items that are on the network. So those are the kinds of things that we want to address in this particular bond. What we've done recently in support of safety and security, our phones now, Ring Central being on the internet, is provide for LTE backups at all of our sites so that if internet was to go down, there would still be a backup for our phones. Also, we're already starting the refresh with ion UPSs, so the battery backup should the power go out. But to be able to complete that work would be reliant on a bond. And then the new ion UPSs are really reliant on reliable cooling. So making sure that the IDFs and the MDFs at all of our sites have adequate cooling is going to be very important to extend the lifespan of all of this infrastructure. So this really is about the core network infrastructure, the backbone that's making everything else work. I can click on this. Across the top, you see essentially an overview of what things cost. You had mentioned, the potential for additional closures, but also it depends on what use of sites like Oak look like moving forward. And so when you see some of these prices, they could be rolled back depending on the use of the facility. So if it wasn't a fully operational school, clearly we wouldn't need the same level of investment. We'd be able to sort of do a little less and make it stretch a little further without having the same volume of activity on the campus. On this particular link, oops, sorry. This, if I can get it. Oops, was somebody trying to help me? Oh, it's this one?
You're trying to get that link?
Yeah,
Yeah. With your mouse there.
this one, right? Yeah, okay, there we go. So this nifty little link will show you, a school cost breakdown, which is the screenshot you saw on that slide. But then what it looks like for a high school versus a K-8 versus an elementary. Desert Mountain is a special place all on its own. It's going to require a little more attention than some of these others. But if you scroll across, you'll be able to see what some of these other district buildings also the needs as it relates to there. And these prices are based on some of the work that we've recently had priced out. You may recall as a consent agenda item earlier this year, we're working on what will be an E-rate project here for Mojave MDA to refresh at least part of the network here. So we were able to have some pretty relevant numbers to be able to build this out further. And of course, when the time comes to do this work, there's a lot of walks of the campus to make sure we're identifying the exact numbers and the exact need as those continue to evolve. But what success looks like with this bond would be reliable Wi-Fi in every classroom, and also what we've heard from our sites is reliable Wi-Fi in the parking lot, on the playgrounds, the fields, in the gardens. Those gardens are essentially outdoor classrooms, and so they're getting used a lot. We've received that feedback. Systems that support the safety, the learning, communication without interruption, infrastructure that lasts that 5 to 7 years, and a district that remains competitive and future ready. So this bond is about maintaining that invisible infrastructure that is oh so critical to keeping our students safe, our classrooms connected, and our district operating every day. If you'd like me to go into any additional detail or answer your questions now or at another time, I'm happy to do so.
Mr. Sharkey?
Thank you for that, and thanks for the sheet with the detail. So down to the number of access points, switches, UPS, who did that? Was that us walking buildings? Was that a consultant? Like, who did the actual counts to get the estimates?
So it started with us and our networking team. Specifically, they go out and for the Mojave MDA, I did the walk with them. I was learning as we go. It's the first time I was looking at those kinds of things as well. We'd done it at Desert Canyon as well recently, foreseeing the need. So for Desert Canyon Elementary and Middle School, and then here at Mojave and the MDA, we do the walk. We put together an initial quote, but then get some information back from a potential vendor. Then, depending on who gets, the job, essentially, they would come out and do additional walks. Sometimes we count too many wireless, hookups that are necessary because they're getting better. You don't need to have as many now. And so those kinds of things, sometimes you're gonna see numbers go down, sometimes you might see them go up. But the biggest thing right now is the lack of PoE. I hear about PoE every day. Our cameras just demand a lot more wattage, and we can't get those new cameras until we get upgraded switches. So that's why you see a significant cost associated with upgrading the MDFs and the IDFs because it's the infrastructure as much as it is the switches. Also, our internet provider is making upgrades, so this will really enhance the bandwidth and the internet that's available to our users. So that will be hopefully noticeable too with our end users.
Thank you.
What's PoE?
Okay, so the exact term,
Ish.
I mean, it's essentially the power and the data that goes toward powering the camera. So it's the electrical and it is the data. But what PoE actually stands for, because I knew somebody would ask me, is, wait for it.
Dr. Patinsky's answering.
Power over Ethernet.
You win.
Did he say it?
Yes, he did. He was
I'm
whispering
sorry, I didn't
it. No,
hear you.
it's okay.
God, I was
He's
gonna
still
have
celebrating.
I was gonna have a proud moment there too. And
Yeah, well, you got it.
But
You
yeah,
both win.
so essentially it's the wattage that's necessary
Okay.
to drive all of these things. You might think you can plug in many more things and you just can't. That switch is maxed out.
And then I don't know if this is factored in at all and what might be to secure our student information, because I know of some threats that were in Tucson and in Flagstaff districts for ransomware. Is that factored in anywhere in our cost to be, as thieves become more sophisticated, I imagine we need to be more sophisticated to protect our student and employee.
It is why all of these upgrades are so necessary, especially as we start to talk about the items that are end of life, especially they start to create a vulnerability as it relates to malware and bad actors and such. So that is absolutely a consideration in why these moves are necessary.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Thank you, Ms. Harrington.
Thank you.
Those question slides, I guess, just aren't necessary. I just wanted to make sure we had a little break in between to get those questions answered. So in 2025, we embarked on a facility condition assessment. We hired a company that came out with their staff, and they looked at all of our property, every square inch, every piece of equipment, everything that we have that has a life cycle and will eventually die. And so we now have a facility condition assessment that actually goes out 20 years, although that can't be reliable for 20 years. You will have to reassess throughout the years, but I'm showing a 5-year segment of our facility condition assessment for each one of our learning communities. I've got here just as a reminder of what schools are in each learning community. And then this is the total spend just for the facility condition assessment for that learning community. That $28,902,000 you'll see is the biggest number of all the learning communities because it's Desert Mountain. Desert Mountain is the big one. When I originally did a 10-year cycle, Desert Mountain alone was $36 million. We had a parent in one of the Phase 2 committee meetings last week or the week before asked me, well, for that much money, can't you just rebuild the school? Well, today, Desert Mountain would probably cost us about $200 million to rebuild it. So no, it's worth investing in it. So I'll roll through these pretty quickly. Again, the learning community, the schools that are included. One thing that I would like you to take note, because it's handy later on, is the schools that have been recently rebuilt. Chaparral in '08, Cocopah in '12. Copper Ridge is an older school, 2000. Cherokee in 2022, right at the end of COVID. Sequoia is one of the old girls in this one. And then Cochise was rebuilt in the late 90s. So that does or becomes reflective. Hello. In some of these, and you see that because those schools in that learning community are much, much newer, more than half of the price of the Desert Mountain. Now, Desert Mountain Learning Community also has more schools. They have more square footage in that learning community. Saguaro, here's another one. Now, Saguaro, about half of Saguaro was rebuilt in '08. The media center, the cafeteria, the gymnasium, and the auditorium were not rebuilt. They got a little bit of remodel, but for the most part, they were not rebuilt. So it's the two-story classroom buildings that are what was rebuilt and the front office building. So not as old, but Saguaro's a little bit iffy. Mojave got rebuilt, although the gymnasium building, cafeteria were not rebuilt. That was in 2012. Navajo had that tremendous fire and was refurbished, but not fully rebuilt. It's got a little bit of work to do. Kiva's fairly new, and Pueblo's fairly new. And you see that number is a lot different from the schools that have older schools and more square footage. Only $3 million. A good majority of that is for Saguaro and its needs. Arcadia, again, with the exception of Tavon, a group of schools that is not all that old. They're old enough that you're starting to see some end of life for some of the equipment, but generally speaking, these are not considered old schools in any way, shape, or form. Tavon has one building. I think it's building 11. It's kind of an E shape, all classrooms. That's the oldest building on that campus, built in the 60s. And again, these are just the numbers associated with life cycle work. There's no honeydews, there's no special anything. This is the boring stuff that nobody's going to get terribly excited about unless they were just in the bathroom that didn't work. And then lastly, administrative support, that's that line that was a 0 on the pamphlet, that I believe needs to have a number so that we can take care of these. One of the ones particularly interesting, the materials distribution or the warehouse on 95th Way, that has all of these departments operating out of it. And oh, by the way, the district's NOC, which houses all of the district's servers, all the brains of the district, not the people, the machines. And so this is a busy place. This is a busy building that deserves attention. Air conditioning, swamp coolers, roofing. The paint job has got to be more than 20 years old. It's not even holding back rain anymore. If we get a rain that's directional, it'll just rain right through the building. That's $10 million. Now, I mentioned that there are buildings that we've not, for years, taken care of. And in this 10 million is Cholla and Apache. Now, Apache, for the most part, has purpose. That's our bus barn. That's where we have mechanics and bus drivers and the leadership down there that takes care of that. That serves our southern end of the district. But there's a 2-story building that we talked about a couple months ago that is a dilapidated, horrible building that we need to, in my mind, just tear it down. Just get rid of it and not spend a bunch of money trying to fix it. Because I took Apache and Cholla off of this search, and all of a sudden we're saving nearly $6 million by not continuing to play around with those buildings. The buildings that are empty have very little purpose. And so to spend the money to just tear them down and not spend the money to do the work that is required in this facility condition assessment, I think is the wise bet. And I'll show you how that plays out on my spreadsheet. Questions?
On the DM, building-wise, it's 8 buildings to 5 or 6 in the other communities, so it's 60% larger. But the net spend is 100%. It's 2x. Is that square footage? What is it about DM that makes it proportionally more for maintenance?
So DM is 100,000 square feet bigger than any of our other high schools.
The whole across the whole community, though?
No,
is really just the high school itself?
DM, if you compare DM to the rest of our high schools, it's much bigger, okay? It's 30 years old, and that amount of square footage, and again, this is the plumbing that we're seeing, cast iron failures, a lot of those things. DM has never really had much as far as any renovations, upgrades. They had, when they did the technology, once upon a time, we used abacuses and, different things. Some genius, when it was time to do computers and have a network system for computer support, decided to put all the IDFs and MDFs in telephone rooms that were also electrical rooms. A transformer generates a tremendous amount of heat and is only beating up that network equipment. There was no air conditioning put into those spaces. So you've got a transformer, you got a punch block, which was copper wire that really didn't need air conditioning. And then somewhere along the way, they put in these IDFs that all generate heat themselves. The transformers are generating heat. You walk into the room and you could pass out just as soon as you open the door. So that's a big part of DM, and not only what Christine presented and Josh presented, but DM is just one of those things that has a lot of work. And then when you look at the other schools, they're not rebuilds. They're all schools that were built in the 80s and 90s. Mountainside was 91, very big school. So that, just that desert mountain community is just a lot of square footage, older buildings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who did you say did the facility condition assessment?
That was Bureau Veritas.
Bureau Veritas, okay.
We did an RFP, and we interviewed 6 consultants, and they gave us the best price, and I think it was about $300,000 that we paid for that. We had other prices that were over $1 million, and a couple of prices that were $600,000 to $700,000.
Okay, and then I have a question under the Coronado Learning Community for the PIMA Level D. What costs do you have associated with the changes that need to be made to make that a Level D? Are those included in this?
So they are not. Those will not be part of the bond. We'll take care of that through district capital that we have right now. That team is still working on placement, knowing where everything needs to be, but I don't anticipate that being a big dollar amount. So far, from what I've seen from the conversations, maybe a wall here or a door here, but what I've seen is very, very minimal.
Okay, thank you.
Not seeing any other questions or comments? Mr. Railer, is the word conclusion
Anywhere near?
ready now?
Not quite yet.
Not quite yet.
I'm not going to go deep into fine arts and athletics, except to say that those are 2 groups of voters that are super important. So we have to make sure that we're keen about the work that we do to make sure that they know that they're being taken care of as well. We'll have more for you on that later on. So we've got energy, air quality projects. The big thing is we have all of these solar projects, and I won't spend a ton of time on this, but we pay a capital lease on some of our solar projects. That's coming to fruition in about 3 years. We pay the provider 8 cents, 9 cents, 10 cents, whatever it is, at every contract's a little bit different. I've got all of that information. I'm sure Mr. Sharkey would love to devour that. We have an absorption chiller. Total crazy. It actually takes hot water, turns it into cold water, sends it through the system. It services Mountainside and Desert Mountain. That is coming to an end. We can buy that out this year for $619,000. We currently pay just over $100,000 a year in fees to them, so that will pay itself back pretty quickly. Mid-State Energy in 2016-17, we did a lighting and water savings project, and that one's got about $6 million. I can show you in the spreadsheet, but we'd like to pay that one off as well. Air purification, clean air is important to everybody, so we do have a project in there to provide clean air for all of our classrooms.
Can I just add that like with Mid-State Energy and the others, we're spending M&O dollars now, $1 million. That would free up that to be able to put into other expenses.
Well, that was going to be like at the end of everything, the last question that I have, which is, and for a normal person, it gets so confusing to know that like if you sell a building, those dollars can't be used to kind of help offset the operating budget. This will look like a big number, and yet somehow we don't have any funds. And doesn't this then alleviate the need? And we have to explain to people, no, these are kind of walled funds, or special purpose funds. But is there any kind of relief that this will bring to the M&O budget?
So there's the $2 million there. This past year, we spent $600,000 in temporary AC when HVAC went down at Chaparral. So when you can invest in current technology in terms of our heating and cooling systems, then when you don't have the need for the temporary. So you do save from the M&O component, and there's some other savings. I think Shannon's ready to give even more specific detail.
So one of the items we have in there is for Midstate. Right now, we have 2 lease options that are out there. One is a solar project. It will end in the 29 year. We can factor that in. We haven't in this one, but it's about $3 million that we pay. That's owed still for that project is a little over $3 million. We also have a Midstate project. That one is factored into what Dennis is going to show. If we were to pay that off, it would be about $6.7 million to pay that off. However, that would save us, there's a penalty for paying off early, but even with that, we would save $1.5 million in interest. So that's, I think, worthy of being able to save dollars. But the other part of it is that we move funds from M&O to what's called energy savings to be able to pay these leases and principal payments on these projects. So it would free up, if we were to pay one or both of them off, would free up M&O dollars in the future because that's money we're transferring over. Right now, we get some rebates, so that's kind of helped to offset some of those costs. But we're moving about $2 million or more a year. In fact, this next budget revision will have a $2.5 million move to be able to cover those leases for us. So definitely paying those off saves money because we're not paying interest on some of those things, but it also saves M&O dollars because we pay them off and we're no longer having to shift dollars from M&O over to another fund for those payments. In addition to, we are putting a lot of money in from M&O, trying to put Band-Aids on things, repair things. Those will come from M&O.
Yeah, that's-
Whereas if we could just replace it, and that's true from transportation, with our buses, with fuel tanks for transportation. That's true for our AC units. Like I said, what was it, $600,000? $600,000 this year for a generator to help with AC until we could get the new unit in or repaired. So there's some big ways that we could also help our M&O budget by taking some of these repairs off.
I would be interested to see that as we get, closer with details quantified sort of over time, like how much do we think will come off of M&O or be saved from M&O, 1 year in, 2 years in, 3 years in, as a result of the investments that we're making.
Yes, we
with
can
the
do that.
bonds. Thank you.
Okay, coming into the home stretch. So, I've color-coded. Some people criticize my color coding, but it makes sense to me, so it must make sense to everybody else. Security, information technology, student transportation, life cycle. Those are 4 areas that we must take care of. And in total, that's a few pennies. That's over $200 million all by itself. So that's we really need to do. Then we get into learning environment, and when I talk about learning environment, it is all of the things that make our campuses attractive. Shade, landscaping, hardscaping, gates, fencing, interior refreshes, which typically means paint and carpet, exterior refreshes, typically paint. Window coverings, that's your question there, Ms. Carney. Restrooms, media center, and furniture, fixtures, and equipment. A lot of the schools, the high schools, the middle schools, when they were rebuilt, they did not get new furniture. They recycled basically everything they had. So some of the furniture in some of our schools could be upwards of 30 years old from its original construction. So we've got some numbers in there. One thing to keep in mind is our capital override has a line item for FF&E, and so I've factored that in, that we know that each year for the next 4 more years, we'll be getting about $500,000 to also contribute to FF&E and making sure that we're turning over the furniture as we need to. So one of the questions, well, Dennis, what about these schools that are closed Echo Canyon, $0. Now, when I talked to Paul Goldstein and Christine earlier today, they did have about $2 million attached to that campus. But if we have a renter come in, the network is not our responsibility. That network becomes their responsibility. And so would like to take care of the facility condition stuff, but otherwise not spend the money on Echo. Then we have the, well, what about the other schools? What about the ones that are in the conversation of Redfield and Laguna and all of those Desert Mountain Learning Community? Well, those all have dollars attached to them, and it does, it's like kind of painful because it could be a significant amount of money. So we need to be cognizant of that we have to plan, but at the same time, we need to recognize at what point we are going to close those and make sure that we're handling that money responsibly. Okay? So, couple of areas of interest. Solar. We have it, it's there, it's operating, it's generating electricity, but it still costs us money every year. 2 campuses that are not always performing as well as they could. Massive systems, Copper Ridge, Desert Mountain. I have it in here right now that we could buy out in our 15-year term. We could buy them out, one at $1 million. Oh, no, that's not coverage. Yes, I'm sorry. 1,381,000 is Copper Ridge, and then 2,621,000. Well, I was working with our consultant yesterday. We were talking about that, and there's a clause in our contracts that we can just tell the provider, take your equipment back. We don't want it. We're not going to spend another dime on it. Now, we haven't made that phone call because I'm sure they're not going to be happy with us. Because if you look at an aerial photo of Desert Mountain High School, there's a lot of solar on there. And imagine if you've had that solar, you've been getting paid for it, and now the owner says, hey, get rid of that stuff. I don't want it anymore. So we'll see how that negotiation works out. But if well, I guess I haven't shown you the bottom line. Right now, I'm at 416 million. I do not want to be at 416 million. I think that we need to be south of 400 million, and I have a way to get there. And by chipping away at some of these projects that I think, I wanted to illustrate where we could be, but I think we get rid of and not have to have that conversation and get well below $400 million. So I'm going to leave it there. I know you have all had an opportunity to look at this. I'm happy to answer any questions. There's still more work to do. As Randy and Megan pointed out, there used to be a time when you could go all the way to June 15th to get your resolution in. Shannon knocked me in the face and said, well, we can't do that now. We got to do, so I lost the month of May. I've got a lot of work to do in about 8 days to get things ready, because I'm going to Zion National Park on the 7th, whether you like it or not. And so I've got a lot of work to do to fill in all these blanks. I've got placeholders now, so you can see what that looks like, and I'm happy to walk through that.
Any questions, members of the board? Ms. Carney?
What is the cost for the pamphlet and to go to ballot?
We actually have that in our next presentation, talking
Oh,
about
okay.
selling a property. But we're going to ballot no matter what, because we have 2 governing board seats open. So that alone is about $82,000. For the other portions of it, I'll cover a little bit more in detail, but you're looking at basically 62, 68. You're about 70-ish on top of that. So, about 100 and, yeah. But we'll go through it a little bit more in the
All right,
next
that sounds
presentation.
good. Thank you.
I would just like to commend the entire team for its obvious collaboration and the breadth and depth of tonight's rich discussion. The thoroughness was commendable. The cross-department teamwork was obvious, and the professional use of external resources helped us with objectivity, from surveying likelihood of passage to tax implications to the various statement of needs thoughtfully scoured across our district, the financial responsibility and stewardship we have to our taxpayers, keeping in mind the optics and the context of our recent decision, how to be sure we're clear on safety and technological safety and infrastructure, as well as maintenance of our facilities. Just a big shout out to all of you for your rich hours and hours of preparation, and I wish you all the best in your next 8 days before you go to Zion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, that brings us now to our 4C, and Shannon's given us a preview of that
Yeah,
as we look
this-
at the presentation regarding the potential election.
This
for
one won't
authorization.
take nearly as long as the one we just went through, but we thought it was important. As the board knows, I've talked about not wanting to part with district assets as a concern with respect to how do you ensure down the road that future boards have opportunities to have facilities available, even when we have to shrink our footprint now. But we do have some properties that haven't been used for school sites for a very, very long period of time. And so in conversations that we've had and in talking with council, there's an opportunity here that we want to at least get the board's feedback on before we take the potential bond issue to the voters. We can add more.
Is this? Doesn't IT usually? That's it right there, yeah, okay. Well, I'm so used to it just automatically appearing. So, okay. President Dr. Lewis, Vice President Sharkey, members of the board, Dr. Menzon, guests. This has come up actually a couple of different times. I know as we looked at, closing schools and repurposing buildings, one of the questions that's come up is what kind of properties do we have? Do we need to sell them? Do we need to look at other options? Do we need to look at leasing them out? And so this is just gonna go briefly over the properties that we have that are not school use, what we're using them for, and then open it up for discussion if we want to move forward with some options. These are all of the schools that sites that we currently have right now that are non-school use. I did include Pima and Echo Canyon in there because they, well, not that we are in any way, shape, or form talking about selling those properties, but those are properties that are included that are non-use school properties. Copper Ridge is also on there, again, not because we're thinking of anything with Copper Ridge. However, there is, I'm calling it the annex. There's a small parcel of land that's off to the side from Copper Ridge that is leased out, as well as some tennis courts. We have the district office, which we know we're looking at that possibility right now with the city of Scottsdale. This building here, Mojave District Annex, Oak, San Salvador Annex, and the warehouse. This just looks at how those sites are utilized and the revenue that we're generating off of them. Cholla is one that we've talked quite a bit about in needing some TLC or money put into it if we're going to continue using it. Right now we have Miracle League, Stars, and the city of Scottsdale's got a temporary firehouse on it that will last for a couple of years. Apache, we have one lease that's there that will end in October. Then it's primarily used for transportation, fuel station, bus barn. They do their DPS training at that location. Oak just went into a lease with the city of Scottsdale for, I think it's like 2 years. that they'll be using that as they renovate some buildings. Nutritional services, however, that catering portion will be moving, as well as the instrument warehouse and athletics department. PEMA will be utilizing as a level D school. Special education will be moving over there, as well as the nutritional services and the musical instrument warehouse. ECHO, we're still working on, and I know there's some more discussions tonight. The Copper Ridge Annex, like I said, that's being used right now for a landscape yard, so just a very small amount coming in from that. And then the village uses our tennis courts. Their tennis courts. How are these sites used? Main Street, we know that that's a sale pending right now. That's Human Resources and the Finance Department. We'll be moving over here, hopefully, to the Mojave District Annex. We have San Sal, which again is facilities, transportation, and our northern school bus barn. So we have a bus barn up north for schools up there, one in the south so that we don't have our drivers driving a half an hour just to get from the north to the south to a location. And then warehouse is very utilized with purchasing, IT, warehouse, grounds. We have a nutritional services freezer up there, and then our print shop. Right here, we just look at what are the requirements to sell district property. If you're selling to another municipality, like we are looking at with the city of Scottsdale, that does not require going to the vote or going to voters to sell that property. However, if you are doing something outside of that, so selling property to a non-municipality, that does require an election for the voters to say, or the community to say, yes, we would like to sell that property. And I forgot to mention that we have Jim Gill online, who is an attorney for elections, and so he's also been helping Laura Blanco's server with some of this information. But it basically goes over what are the things that are needed. And again, board action would be required if you wanted to sell property or put that on for the election. If it is successful, having it on the ballot doesn't mean you are required to sell it. It means the voters have given you the authority to do that. It could happen now. It could happen 5 years from now. It could happen 20 years from now. It could happen never. It doesn't say you have to sell that property. It just gives the authority to do so whenever you would like to, and that authority does not expire. Leasing is a little bit different, and I didn't go into a whole lot about leases, but the authorization to lease expires if you're going past a certain amount of time. So we do like 5-year leases. That does not require a vote. If you're doing a much longer term lease, that does require a vote, and those expire in 20 years, but they can be renewed after another 20 years with an election. For this purposes, we're really talking more about if there's properties that we want to consider putting up for sale. One of the benefits is that if we're already doing an election, you can add this on if you would like to and kind of combine it within the costs. But again, it does not mean that we have to sell those properties. It just is getting the authority to do so. The cost for the election, Ms. Carney had asked about what it would cost, and this kind of looks at, we're doing an election anyway, so this would be bond or selling property. We know that we have to do an election anyways. Because it's a midterm, it's not as expensive with the amount per voter. It's 50 cents per active voter. I'm going off of the 25. That was the last time we had an election. How many voters we had, it obviously could change. We'll know when it gets a little bit closer, but that was roughly $82,000 for that. So we will have that fee regardless of any decisions about a bond or selling property. There's $500 per question. If you were selling property, this is correct me if I'm wrong, hopefully, Jim, but it's $500 per question. However, my understanding with the sale of property is you don't have to do a question for each. Like if you wanted to sell multiples, it's not like one question for this property, one question. It's just a question to sell the property. So if you were going to do a bond, it would be $500. If you were going to be a bond and sell property, $1,000. We have to do pamphlet printing and postage. Again, this is going off of our last election, but roughly $62,000 for that. Translation services, we have to do that through an outside company, so about $2,000 for that. And then legal fees for the election is about $15,000. Now, the legal fees for election is covered through our prepaid. So if you were going to do a bond, it would be $500. If you were going to be a bond and sell property, $1,000. We have to do pamphlet printing. Right. That is paid, the legal fees for the election are paid through prepaid legal, so that's not something that really would hit our M&O budget per se, because again, that would be covered through our prepaid. But it is a cost that is part of the election. So all in, if you were to do nothing and just have the governing board election, it would be about $82,000. If you were to do bond and want to move forward with potentially selling a property, you're looking at roughly $146,000, $147,000 for that. And again, those are rough estimates based off of the last election we did. So with that, I'll open it to questions. If you do want us to move forward with possible sale, we would need to bring that as a resolution at the next board meeting in May, because again, as was talked about earlier, there is some timing in there of when we need to have information to the county and ballot language and that kind of stuff. So that is why we are bringing it forward. No action tonight, just need to get a feel of if that's something the governing board is interested in doing.
Mr. Sharkey?
Two things, one detailed. On the pamphlet printing and postage, is that the fine print legalese pamphlet or a marketing or both?
That's the legalese,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
So it'll have like the pro and con statements and what the ballot will say and what it means.
Okay. If there is any marketing, if we, like for the bond, if we said we really want to do it, you know, is that something we do?
So we can communicate factual information about what the bond is and what it would be used for. There would be an outside organization that would be responsible for any advocacy. We can't use taxpayer dollars or district resources for advocacy.
Thanks. And then just more generally, are you or the district going to come with suggestions about buildings? I just think this is the good context. Seems like there's a and coming.
You saw 2 or 3 potential, Apache, Cholla, and then Oak. We've got a lease agreement with the city for 2 years with the potential to extend that. And we may or may not want to sell any of these at any point in time. So the first thing that's most important is we're simply asking for voter authorization for this board or a board in the future to have the authority to sell those properties. So in my mind, you could even put all 3 of them on there, and it's not a commitment you're going to sell them, but it gives you the ability to do so.
Thank you.
Dr. Potensky?
And so that I understand kind of the financial benefits of doing that, we do elections every 2 years, presumably for governing board members. It's the fact that the bond carries with it the $62,000 of pamphlet production that is the thing that we're kind of piggybacking on. And if we, outside of a bond year, decided we do actually want to move forward with a property sale, we would then be incurring that $62,000
Yes.
for the sole purpose of the property sale.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you do it on an off election, the cost gets quite a bit higher
Yeah.
for doing an election. So again, this doesn't say that we are going to do it. It says it gives the voters the option
Yeah.
to tell us we want to. Doing it now is good because we're going to have an election anyways. It's a midterm if we're talking about a bond. We do have an election every 2 years but you would be, basically, you couldn't do anything until you put that on that, if we didn't deal with it now.
And we would be spending an extra $60,000 or so.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if you're looking for a sense of the board. This is something, that I raised. I think it makes a ton of sense. I think we've all been very clear that we care about every dollar that's spent, and so I don't see why we wouldn't leverage if we move forward with a bond. Obviously, if we don't, then it doesn't make sense. But if we move forward with a bond, I don't see why we wouldn't leverage that same expense to address the property sale, knowing that it doesn't oblige us. It just gives us that optionality and flexibility.
And you think all 3?
I mean, if we're doing it, I would
Yeah.
give us the map. I mean, you don't want to be disingenuous with voters and give yourself, we could sell any school, right? There is a reason why you go to voters, and voters have a right to kind of assess and kick the tires on the thinking. So I think it should be credible, and these 3 are certainly candidates. So yes, I would give ourselves the maximum flexibility within that construct.
Ms. Carney?
Thank you, President Lewis. I just think it's a little difficult to make a decision like that when we don't really have the proper financials on this, or the proper, like I went, and thank you to Dennis, because he toured me around Choya, and so he had mentioned there were different, even interest in that property as far as like the Aquatic Center, City of Scottsdale is looking at building, another AZ Aspire is interested in, you know, I think, an autism school, so I feel like we don't have all the information of even the interest, the current interest on these properties. Also, does it make sense? How much is Troy costing us right now with, you know, and how much, I don't know, are we breaking even? Where are we at with the leases that we currently have? I just feel like we don't have the proper information to make a decision to put it on the ballot. Even though I do agree with you that we absolutely should, and if we do, I also think that we need to discuss lowering the bond. I mean, you can't, wouldn't this be a way to help the taxpayer as well?
Well, I think the spirit is we're not deciding to sell the properties. We're just seeking the authority to have that flexibility in future years without having the additional expense and process of running a new election. So that's why my bar for proceeding was a little lower, is because it's a two-step process, and we wouldn't be triggering the second step, which I agree with you, would require a lot more understanding for each of these properties.
But we haven't even discussed why only those three, or why, you know, or why those three. I mean, I've heard you talk about workforce housing coming to Apache. I don't see anything about that on here. I just feel like we don't have enough information, although I am for putting it out to the voters, but let's put them all out there then. I mean,
Well, when
why
you
are we
say
choosing-
put them all, what do you mean? You
I
mean
don't
put
know
Pima
anything.
and Echo Canyon and any potential, you know, so what we've done is we said, here are facilities and assets that we have that haven't been used as schools for a long time. Apache was an elementary school. Choya has been used as a school by us before, but that's been decades since those have been used. We have uses and rental for them, but the question that we would be able to explore if the voters were to give authorization to sell is, what's the market value? And is the benefit of selling that asset large enough to offset what we might get through some lease arrangement with some other provider? So we'd still do our due diligence on what's the best long-term benefit for the district. It just gives us an option that we don't currently have. The sale of any property is not possible absent voter authorization. And so if we can piggyback on what we know is likely to be the cost for a bond coupled with our regular election, it gives us that flexibility. We'd still do the homework, and I don't know how quickly that would be done, but I think those are the three logical locations to seek voter authorization for, because they haven't been used as schools for quite some time.
Can I just end with this, and let me just confirm, so each property would be a separate question to the voter?
One question, 3 properties.
So you could add 6 properties, you could add 8 properties, and it's the same cost?
Madam President, Ms. Carney, it's my understanding that you can combine the sale of the properties in one ballot question. And that was from review of an email from my partner, Jim Gill. So we can get further clarification about what that would look like if the board decides to proceed further.
So you could add 6 properties. So you could add 6 properties, you could add 8 properties, and it's the same cost?
Madam President, Ms. Carney, it's my understanding that you can combine the.
Can I make that as a plug for the bond?
Jim Gill. So we can get further clarification about what that would look like if the board decides to proceed further.
So you could add 6 properties, you could add 8 properties, and it's the same cost? Okay, yeah, if we could get further clarification on what that would look like, how that would be worded to the voter. And what
Yes,
that
we'll
would
have
mean.
that in detail for the May 12th meeting. And for the agenda before we get to the 12th, so you can ask clarifying questions
Okay.
before then, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Sharkey.
So love to get a feel from my colleagues on, I'm a voter, I get a ballot, I have 2 questions on it. One says SUSD bond. Do you agree to pay for a bond of $390 million to pay for these things? Right below it hypothetically says, do you give SUSD the authorization to potentially sell these 3 buildings, let's say? I think that's a positive interplay to say that we want to raise money and also we're liquidating unused assets. So I think those two play, if, I'm assuming we're in support of the bond, apologies for not saying that up front. If one is in support of the bond, I think that second one plays well with it. I don't know if anyone has any differing opinions, because that's where it's going to come into play when someone opens up that ballot and marks those fields.
I think Ms. McLennan can probably speak to this as well, but there are many other districts that have done the same thing, where they've asked for a bond issue or authorization or an override at the same time they're seeking authorization to sell property.
Dr. Menzel is correct. You can ask for both things, but they would be separate ballot questions.
Right.
And I agree. I think it would be positive. I mean, we heard over and over again during phase one from families asking, why do we have these properties? And these three particular properties, which I think gets a little bit to how they're the ones put forward, why do we have them? Why aren't we consider selling them? And again, that gets into then the issues, hopefully the state gives us the ability to use property sales to support M&O. Yeah, I think it's a positive that we're being good stewards of assets personally, but
Yeah.
I guess that's a question for the pollster.
Mr. Sharkey? We can
This, other properties on there as well, so that future board can decide what to do with closed property.
Yeah, if there are other closed properties that aren't being used for instructional use, that makes sense to include. I think so. That's when I looked at slide 2, and then you filter down to the ones that aren't being used, those are the 3. But if there are others that make sense, I would agree.
Madam President, I did hear back from my partner, Jim Gale, by email, and it is correct that you can include multiple properties in one ballot question, and he also indicated that our office has not seen one of those elections fail to date.
Thank you. All right. Really nice job. Thank you, Ms. Crozier. At this point, guests, we will be probably going into executive session. I'm going to make a motion to enter executive session pursuant to the statutory citations listed in the agenda, and for the purposes stated, the governing board may recess into executive session pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A3 and A7 for the purpose of attaining legal advice and instructing its representative regarding proposed leases at Echo Canyon K-8 school. And the governing board may recess into executive session pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A3 and A4 for the purpose of obtaining legal advice and instructing the attorney for the public body regarding the superintendent's contract of employment. So I need a second.
Second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. So we'll just move into executive session down the hall. All right, I'm reconvening the special meeting, and we're going to move into action item number 6. I make a motion and request a second for directing the attorney for the public body regarding potential lease options at Echo Canyon K-8 school. And I move that direct the attorney for the public body as discussed in executive session.
I second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, we have a 4 and a 0 and a 1. And as we go to 6B, I make a motion to direct the attorney for the public body regarding superintendent contract of employment. I move to direct the attorney for the public body as discussed in executive session. We need a second.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Okay, we have a 3-2. All right, it's not a motion to adjourn, I just announced it's adjourning, right? Motion to adjourn, I need a second.
Second.
It's 9:38, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, that's a 5-0.